Former House Speaker and California Democratic Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi announced today that she will seek re-election in 2024. If re-elected, this would be Speaker Pelosi's 20th term in office for her San Francisco area district, which she has represented since 1987. Despite some chatter in the country and in the Democratic Party and enthusiasm for new and younger leaders, Speaker Pelosi remains a draw and a force for democracy and for the president's agenda. And she brings decades worth of experience and a resume of battling the ex-president to the job. Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman from California, Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Thank you so much for being here with us on this day.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you, Nicole.
So much of what we know about you are those fierce moments we had it up on the screen. And I remember that day. I think I was on the air that day. You stood up in the Roosevelt Room. You said to Trump, with you, it's always about Russia. It is sort of your unique ability to confront not just him, but his enablers. You have a very able successor in Congressman Jeffries. And I wonder what went into your decision to stay in Congress.
Well, actually, I said with you, it's always about Putin.
That's right.
That's
right.
Russia,
That's
but
right.
Nonetheless,
That's
specifically,
right. That's right.
So literally Putin. But in any case, I feel very exhilarated by the encouragement I had to continue representing my great city of San Francisco. You have the White House behind you. I have homes in San Francisco behind me, and that is my strength. And the needs that our city have right now really call for me to stay another term. I had the privilege of representing San Francisco for a long time, and they have given me the latitude to serve as speaker, as leader for over 20 years, and whip as well. Visit 87 countries, serve 30 years on the Intelligence Committee, all of those things. But at the same time, being central to my service was representing my district. In gratitude to them for that, I have agreed to stay on another term in order to help meet the needs that we have now. We're a resilient city. We've had AIDS. We've had earthquakes. Of course, we've all had pandemic. We intend to come out of this the resilient city that we are in even better. Now, at the same time, our democracy is at risk when we talk nationally. And globally, people are concerned about what it means if our democracy is at risk, and what it means to the war in Ukraine, and what it means to our relationships with NATO, and other alliances that we have. So I am motivated to do everything I can to win this election. I think it's urgent for our democracy, for our relationships worldwide, and more importantly, for every kitchen table discussion in our country about America's working families, to offset what the Republicans are trying to do. Right now, they're trying to undo the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which means they would raise the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. They would offset what we're doing to protect the planet from the climate crisis. So there's urgency in terms of my city, our issues here, and the global conflict between democracy and autocracy.
So let's start with San Francisco, as you know, is my hometown. It's my most favorite place on earth. I'm a UC Berkeley grad and a Bay Area native. And it does need voices and powerful people in Washington. What is your prescription for helping the city from within? I mean, it is the subject of constant attack segments on conservative media. And the tragedy to me seems like they can find enough examples of the most heinous things they want to say about our beautiful city to further the smears and the attacks. How do you turn San Francisco around?
Well, let me just say that these attacks are not unusual from the right. We have the New York Times having a field day about one thing or another in San Francisco, and we wonder about them, too. But nonetheless, the fact is we do have an isolated situation in the downtown San Francisco, in the Tenderloin District and the rest. And we have just said to the people there and the rest who are very much concerned about it, that if there is crime and there is violence and there are drugs, there will be arrest, and that's the way it is. And it doesn't matter if the person is documented or not, they will be prosecuted. And that's something that we brought in that from the Justice Department, the Operation Overdrive, to address that problem. So it's about mental health issues that lead to homelessness, it's about drug use that lead to homelessness, it's about affordable housing, and we are providing housing, and people have to accept it, and if they don't, then there's the ability to take them off the street. And taking them off the street takes some drug use off the streets, some drug sales off the streets. But the fentanyl issue is not just confined to San Francisco. It's a national issue, and we all have to work together. And that's why I'm concerned about what the Republicans are doing in Congress, because their shutdown or their cuts and all the rest will limit our ability to fight the fentanyl crisis, which is an assault. I mean, every community is at risk with that. But again, our city we've been through a lot. We'll come through this very well. But it's confined to a certain part of town, and I wish that people would recognize that, because our city is beautiful and clean, and we'd love for them to visit.
And it's the South of Market area as well, not just the Tenderloin, which has always had its own challenges. But there are people who live in other neighborhoods who are afraid to do their shopping. I mean, retailers have been blasted. And I think it's the images of the brazenness of the theft that startle people that live in other, because you're right, Pacific Heights and other places are still relatively safe. But it is a city that is all, if not rattled and scared, embarrassed by the images of the brazenness of some of the thefts. Is it your sense that you can help at a federal level, or are you using sort of your ability and your personal diplomacy, which everyone that knows you and has covered you knows is in a league of its own, to bring some of the local leaders around to seeing it as you just articulated? These are national problems, but the spotlight and the Klieg lights are on our beautiful city.
Yeah, that's true, and it's not confined. These thefts that you're talking about are not confined to San Francisco.
Of course not. They're happening all over. They're happening in malls and retail stores. They're happening in my neighborhood in New York City. People walk in and steal clothes, and that is absolutely true. But the scrutiny seems especially harsh and in some instances distorted. But nonetheless, they're able to find examples in our beautiful city.
Well, it is, I take issue with your saying, except in the Pacific Heights or something. Yeah, there are issues there as well.
Your husband was brutally attacked.
This crime is indiscriminate.
Yeah, right,
it's indiscriminate. It is discriminate. But the fact is that what we are focusing on right now is the fentanyl issue, the crime, the violence that goes with it. The other issues are issues that we have to deal with, and that's in our city and other cities. Actually, our crime rate is lower than most cities. Most people don't know that, because that's not what the press has to say about it. But we're very proud of our city. We have great unity and a decision to get the job done. And that's really important, because lots of times we have some debates about one thing and another, but right now we're of one mind. It's over. This has to end. That's that. And at the same time, our city is alive and vibrant and thriving, and it's great. And I'm proud to represent it. It is the city of St. Francis, whose Song of St. Francis is our anthem. Make me instrument of thy peace, where there's darkness, light, hope, despair, hope, hatred, love. You know it. But that's our spirit, and in that spirit we will be unified and come out of this more resilient than ever. But again, my fight for our city is individual and parochial in certain neighborhoods, but our fight for meeting the needs of people of our city is the same fight across the country. How do we address the kitchen table needs? Joe Biden has done an excellent job in doing that. He's been a great president, a great union president, and that's good for jobs. Created 9 million jobs that were lost under COVID, additional 4 million jobs, so 13 million jobs altogether, has cut in half inflation. That's not good enough. We have to go down further, but he has cut in half the unemployment rate. Whether you're talking about the rescue package, the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, CHIPS and science, or you're talking about the PACT Act for our veterans, or you're talking about the IRA to save our planet and to reduce the cost of prescription drugs for seniors, he's done a remarkable job. And I just want to say that I saw some poll that didn't look so good, but I also saw that it had 59% Republicans as respondents. Well, I think he did very well in a poll that has 59%
well, that's 60%
respondents in it. So
we don't do a lot. Yeah, we don't do a lot with the polls, not because I know they're all wrong. I just am not sure that they're right very often, especially after the midterms. I want to ask you one more question. You mentioned that crime everywhere is real. And obviously, your husband was attacked in our beautiful city. And I think of you and I think of him when I see the threats of violence and the reckless and careless language thrown around by Trump and other Republicans now that he's been indicted in 4 jurisdictions against Jack Smith, against Fani Willis. Fani Willis yesterday responded to some of your House Republican colleagues who are seeking to reach into her criminal investigation. And I wonder if thinking about your own safety and staying in the Congress anyway was your act of defiance, your act of saying, I will not be intimidated.
Well, I'm not one to be intimidated, period.
We know that.
I have to address the needs of my district, who have been generous to me in enabling me to become the first woman Speaker of the House, and that's a little bit of time away from home, as well as now meeting their needs. So that would be my first call on whether I would run or not. My other responsibility to save our democracy, which we all have, to protect and defend, that's the oath we take. Now, my whole theme on all of this is our flag is still there. Our flag, that's in the national anthem. You know, I'm from Baltimore. I'm proud of the national anthem being written in Baltimore. And everybody cheers toward the end. Yeah. But I cheer when they say, proof to the night, our flag is still there. And that's what we have to do. Make sure that people know our flag is still there with liberty and justice for all. And that's the role I intend to play. I've said to people about elections, if you want to win the election, you have to make a decision to win. And then you have to make every decision in favor of winning. So I've made my decision in favor of winning. I don't want to see any underutilized resources, any wasted time, or any regrets the day after the election that we all didn't do everything in our power to protect and defend, to make sure that our flag is still there with liberty and justice for all.
You're talking about the things that used to be sacred in both parties, and I just have to ask you, I mean, I've had a chance to interview Judge Ludig, who I'm sure in a political sense you viewed as a policy adversary, right? But he's now one of the most vocal explainers in our country about how Donald Trump is now constitutionally prohibited from even being on the ballot. That the 14th, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment makes it unconstitutional to be on the ballot if you've aided, abetted, or incited an insurrection. What do you think about that legal conversation?
Well, it's interesting, as you point out, the direction it's coming from,
right.
Not from the left, but from serious, on the right, constitutional scholars. And that's something that I get asked about all the time. And I'll just leave it up to the constitutional scholars to describe that. But I think at the same time, we have to understand that he's not the only one. That if you see the actions of the Republicans in Congress, you know that we have to win the election. So the courts will do what they do. The scholars will do what they do. But we have to win the election, because otherwise you see us on the brink of a possible shutdown, which impedes our ability to meet the needs of the American people, to fight fentanyl, to fight all kinds of things that are challenging out there, including our national security. When you have a senator who's held up 300 appointments in our Defense Department, and you wonder, how could that possibly be? How do the Republicans let him get away with that? So nonetheless, winning the election is central for us, because what's his name is one person, and others will decide whether he can run or he can't run. The courts will decide further what his exposure and vulnerability is. I don't go anywhere near that. I did what I did in terms of 2 impeachments in the Congress, seeing his behavior. He is not above the law. Neither are any of these other people above the law. And we just have to make the fight and do it with clarity and unity. And how we go forward has to be in a way that unifies America, that just doesn't further divide. And nobody is better at that than Joe Biden, the most empathetic, a visionary, a knowledgeable person with great judgment, a strategic thinker, but a person of great heart who cares about the American. He knows the challenges, he cares about the people, and he has great empathy for them. And again, winning the election, it's a medicine that cures many ills.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
As the Dalai Lama would say.
We covered everything from Lindsey Graham to the Dalai Lama. I think for today, that's pretty good. Thank you very much. To be continued. Thank you very much for spending time with us and for coming here on a day where you've made some news of your own.
My pleasure.
We'll be right back.